And we've been listening to presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden talking about the economy, the country's coronavirus response, and some of his proposals for revitalizing the economy, expanding access to health care, child care, and jobs. For more on all of this, let's bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Hi, Ed. Great to see you. So, Joe Biden there sort of made the parallel between access to caregiving, both child care and elder care, and people's ability to go find work outside the home, that he has a plan to address all of that. Can you break down for us how that plan would work?
Sure. Well, and this addresses a real immediate concern for so many Americans, especially as we near the fall and kids start to head back to school. As you said, addresses concerns about elder care and child care, designed to essentially address the concerns and the needs of a lot of working class Americans across the country. It's a $775 billion plan, or at least it would cost that over a decade. And it would, among other things, essentially try to make it easier for senior citizens who need it to get care in home or at some kind of a more communal-like senior living facility as opposed to a nursing home. There's about a backlog of like 800,000 requests, roughly, for Medicaid to provide care to the Medicare to provide care to elders who are seeking that, elderly people who are seeking that. And so basically, it would help create about 1.5 million jobs in one way or another tied to concerns about elder care. The child care portion of this is an interesting one as well. It would take a plan that we're starting to see implemented in a lot of cities and states across the country and try to take it nationwide. And that is the concept of pre-K3 or pre-K4, pre-kindergarten classes for all of Americans, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. That would create, again, another 1.5 million jobs, roughly. And then on top of that, there'd be a tax credit for office buildings like the one I'm sitting in, the one you would normally sit in New York, and others across the country, to create or establish child care centers in those buildings for employees so that they could have easier access to child care. Look, these are pie in the sky, music to the ears of a lot of people, especially right now as they try to balance their work and life needs. It would be expensive. And it's part of a broader month-long plan of his to unveil all sorts of economic rebuilding ideas amid the pandemic.
Right.
And at a time when it's really the only issue on which he trails President Trump among voters, and that is management of the economy.
Absolutely. He did also touch on health care and his desire to expand it beyond Obamacare. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Biden has had this incredible knack for talking about health care whenever he's talking about anything. He could be talking about foreign policy or baseball, and he'll find a way to work in an answer on health care because he and his campaign know it's a top-of-mind concern and one that Democrats do very well on with voters across the country. It comes, of course, as Republicans are mounting a legal challenge to the Affordable Care Act, which is something that especially congressional Democratic candidates want to focus on going into the elections this fall. Biden, of course, opposed to the idea of Medicare for all, but wants to expand the Affordable Care Act as it currently exists, and of course opposes Republican attempts to undo it. But politically, it's important for him, he believes, to talk about it early and often with voters who consider that, alongside the pandemic and the economic recovery, to be a top-of-mind concern. And really, in many ways, it's all about the pandemic, healthcare is, because if you're walking into a hospital right now with symptoms, it's obviously a big concern. So
intertwined right now. Talk to us a little bit about his ideas for getting more jobs as soon as possible. What's his plan to create those kinds of jobs that are sort of ready-made, ready to go?
Sure. Well, look, what he's doing today is similar to what he's done for the last several weeks. And it's all part of a attempt, at least this month, to focus on economic revival after the pandemic, and allows him, again, to talk about the issue on which he's the most vulnerable, at least in a head-to-head matchup with the president. So our colleague, Beau Eriksen, who tracks the Biden campaign, did the math and realizes now that between the speech he gave this week and the ones he's given over the last 2 weeks, Biden essentially is pushing to create about 10 million new jobs in all sorts of sectors. As you see there, in the manufacturing sector, there'd be about 5 million jobs. There's about 2.25 million new jobs tied to the energy sector and sort of clean energy. also addressing the concerns of climate change, which is another top voting concern. And then today's proposals on elder and child care would create 3 million. Again, these are all sort of pie in the sky, best case scenario kind of things, and likely require full Democratic Party control of Congress to get it done, were he president. But it's designed to show voters, look, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about it seriously. I'm talking about issues that are of concern to base Democratic voters, like climate change, health care, the economy, child care, elder care. And the focus, especially on senior citizens, is critical because Biden has this advantage now with older voters, especially in places like Arizona and Florida, and he'd like to maintain that. And what better way to do that than talk about something that clearly many of them probably are thinking about, and that is, of course, their own personal health care.
Absolutely. Ed, as you've mentioned, of course, the economy was one of President Trump's biggest campaign points in the 2016 election. And polls do still show him having an advantage over Biden on economy. But that lead is shrinking. Does that tell us that what Biden is talking about now, what he is presenting to the American people, is gaining traction?
Yeah, his team would certainly tell you that yes, by focusing on this relentlessly and somewhat specifically over the last 3 weeks, yes, it's cutting into the president's advantage because in their view, they're doing so in a studious and serious way with advertising now to back it up in several swing states, while the president continues to do and say what he does and says on a daily basis, and especially by not focusing necessarily on the immediate concern to a lot of people, and that is, of course, the pandemic. So, if they come out of July with polling that starts to show them having an advantage on who's better equipped to handle the economy as well, then that'll show you that this sort of virtual, minimal public appearance approach that Biden has taken this summer, at least so far, is working and could be to their advantage going into November. But, once we get to the conventions in August, once Biden has picked a running mate, once states that are being severely affected by the pandemic right now are less so in the fall, the dynamics are likely to change. And we'll see whether this strategy continues.
All right. Well, Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight.